If you've ever seen the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, then you'll remember George Clooney's character constantly referring to the quote of, damn, we're in a tight spot. Man, the Suicide Squad definitely was in a tight spot. Let me tell you, man. This is no freaking joke. It's not a drill either. 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, me personally, I don't hold too much stock into Rotten Tomatoes, but seeming that Rotten Tomatoes is where all these early review embargoes, are based off of, right? So a lot of these people that go and see these private screenings and shit of these big movies, which again I think is I still don't understand how some of these people get these early review get the early review access, but whatever. Different story for another time. Rotten Tomatoes is pretty much I wouldn't say the home, but it's one of the homes for a lot of these reviews and these reviewers that review these movies quite early. So again, this is looking good for the Suicide Squad. It's sitting at a shiny 97%. That's amazing. That is freaking amazing. And this is miles ahead of what the 2016 Suicide Squad was. Now, before we get into what I'm trying to get to in terms of the 2016 Suicide Squad in comparison to how the Suicide Squad, which is a soft reboot slash reimagination or reimagining of the universe of the Suicide Squad. If that makes sense to someone, if that makes sense to you guys that are watching this video. But before I get to David Ayer and this whole Ayer cut, whatever the fuck you want to call it, I do want to go over some of these reviews. Now, some of these I saw the other day. It only had like 40 reviews yesterday. Around this time yesterday, only had about 40 reviews. Or 43, something like that, and it was sitting at 93%. Now it's at a high 97%. Now let's just go through just a couple, just a few of these. Rachel Harper says, instead of dwelling on trying to make his bad guys good, Gunn leans into their psychotic tendencies and mixes them all together to create a cocktail of crazy that will shock and delight audiences. And she gave it a 4 out of 5. Now, this person, Rosie Knight, says, the Suicide Squad might be the kindest superhero film ever made. Sure, it's about criminals forced into life-threatening missions at the promise of freedom and the threat of death. But under all that ultra-violence lies something far sweeter. See, reading these reviews and then seeing some of these reviews that these YouTubers are doing too, it's making me super duper excited for this movie, because this is definitely like my most anticipated fucking DC film that I see on plate besides the Batman. I mean, Shazam was cool. Blackout I'm not really looking forward to, but it does sound cool. So maybe. I'm kind of cautious because it's got The Rock in it. Aquaman 2. Is it going to be as good as the first one? How are they going to, introduce a new villain? I mean, I know Black Man is going to be in it, but hopefully he's not like the centerpiece of, in terms of the villain in the movie. What are the other DC projects coming out? Flash. I mean, I'm excited to see Flash, but I'm not super excited to see Michael Keaton back and, seeing Ben Affleck for 5 seconds to get a cheap pop. I don't know, man. Again, I don't want to judge too harsh on the but this movie sounds and it looks like it is a promising at least 9 out of 10. At least a B plus A minus movie in terms of the HAP ratings. But again, we'll have to see literally in a week. I cannot wait. I should probably order my ticket early too. I just not thought about that. Literally a week from tonight, I will be sitting in theaters watching the Suicide Squad, so I cannot wait to see that. Let's go into a couple of other reviews before we get into the actual topic of discussion, which is David Ayer. Jesus Agudo says, "A feast of blood we didn't think possible in nowadays superhero cinema. It's funny, naughty, filled with action that doesn't erase its heart." Dan Buffa says, "Gunn Cinematic Paradise has enough visual dazzle for 3 regular movies, the equivalent of the kitchen sink being tossed at the wall, twice for good measure." Oh, man. I can't wait. I cannot fucking wait. Now, we go through this good, fun, happy, cheering time for the Suicide Squad, and to me, this is a win on all. This is a win for everyone. This is a win for James Gunn, which that should go without saying. It's James Gunn. So this is a win for James Gunn, nonetheless. A win for the actors involved. A win for the Suicide Squad brand. A win for the DCEU brand. A win for the DC brand in the box office. I think this movie is gonna get a lot better in box office than people think, even though it is getting the same day release on HBO Max, which is a huge bummer, and is really going to do this movie a disservice, obviously, regardless. But I think that this is a win for everyone. It's a win for Warner Brothers, a win for DC, a win for DCEU universe. It's a win for the cast, the direct, James Gunn, everybody. It's a win. Now, with that being said, someone has something to say. Now, this comes days after what we saw in the film community, where the original Space Jam director, I forget his name, nobody really cares anyways, but the director of the original Space Jam movie came out and said that the sequel, Space Jam 2, was a pile of hot, steaming shit. And while I haven't seen the movie, I can't agree with him or disagree with him, but just basing it off of what most people are saying about the movie, a lot of people are saying that he's right. So, whatever. But at the same time, you are criticizing, and taking the shine away from the director of Space Jam 2, as well as everyone else involved. There are a lot of people, again, I think that it's the way I feel about wrestling. It's the reason why I don't really, I had to, as much as I wanted to do a wrestling podcast, I really can't, because if I step into that, there's still a little bit of hope for me to step into that career field, and if I do that, and it's everything's on the internet now, so obviously that wouldn't go well when you're critiquing people in the business while also being in the business, and I think that that was a perfect example of what not to do, which is what the Space Jam, the original Space Jam director did with the Space Jam 2, about the Space Jam 2 movie. Now we have David Ayer, and this comes from Variety. David Ayer slammed studio cut of Suicide Squad, which is his version of not his version, but his release of Suicide Squad years ago in 2016, but also praises James Gunn's new movie, which that's very important. A lot of people tried to make it seem like he was, but at the same time, although he's not shitting on James Gunn's version of Suicide Squad, he's still taking away some of the limelight of it. And but I will say this: I'm glad it's coming now and not next week. I will say that. I'm glad that this is happening. He's airing out all his grievances now and not a week from today. So on Thursday, David Ayer posted an emotional letter on Twitter that praises James Gunn's The Suicide Squad and revealed information about his director's cut of the polarizing 2016 film Suicide Squad. Now, he goes on to say, "I put my life into Suicide Squad. I made something amazing. My cut is intricate and emotional journey with some bad people who are shit on and discarded, a theme that resonates in my soul." Ayer wrote, "The studio cut is not my movie. Read that again. And my cut is not the 10-week director's cut. It's a fully mature edit by Lee Smith standing on the incredible work by John Gilroy. It's all Stephen Price's brilliant score with not a single radio song in the whole thing. It's quite a bit to unpack there. Now, he said that first of all, he put his life into Suicide Squad, which I don't doubt that one bit. I believe him. Because what we got in 2016, which I still enjoyed, I still loved that movie, and I'm definitely in the minority in that one, but I freaking love the 2016 Suicide Squad. Yes, it has its flaws. I'm not saying it's the greatest DC movie or even one of the greatest DC movies, but I still loved it because it was fun. It was a fun ride for me, although a lot of it didn't make sense, especially when it came to Enchantress. I thought that's when it really shot the bed. I thought everything else was honestly pretty damn impressive with what they did. I don't think... Now, some people say it was a bad day at the office. To me, I don't think that movie was a bad day in the office. I just think that Warner Brothers did what they always do and what any big money production studio does, which is they just interfere. They make it their movie. They don't give a shit about these directors. Yeah, you'll put the director's small little stamp on it, but that's about it. Everything else is cut. It's cut. Period. I mean, there's nothing anybody's going to do about it. You know, the directors can't do anything about it. No executive producer can do anything about it. It's the studios. They say, look, this is what we want in our movie. This is how we want our movie to be made. Now, I think this last part of what he said, at least in this paragraph of what he said from his letter, that's probably the most important part of this whole paragraph, of what he's already told us so far. He said it's not the 10 weeks director's cut. It's a fully mature edit by Lee Smith standing on the incredible work by John Gilroy. I don't know who any of those people are, but obviously, you know, they're editors or whatever. But the fact that we didn't get what David Ayer's talking about has me concerned a lot. Because I never really looked into what we didn't get in 2016. I only looked at what we got. I'm that kind of guy. I say, hey, look, I'm a you know, the glass is half full kind of guy, instead of the glass is half empty kind of guy that says, oh, this movie was shit, this was bad, blah, blah, blah. Give us the Ayer cut. Do we need the Ayer cut? But we'll get to that here in a second. And he says, it's all Stephen Price's brilliant score with not a single radio song in the whole thing. Now, to me, that's very important. Because what do we get that entire movie? Radio songs. Granted, some were good, some weren't. But the fact that you have now we're diving into the territory. Now he put a little salt in there, a little salt in that open letter, and said, you know, Zack Snyder got his own shit. Zack Snyder was able to come in and make a 4-hour movie, which I would never recommend. I'm telling you guys right now, I hope the Snyder Cut was the last of that. Because 4 hours for a movie, 4 hours for a movie to me is ridiculous. I think 3 hours, if it's a good enough movie, you can do it with 3 hours. Endgame was what, 2.5, something like that. But you would never really notice because it was such a good movie. Snyder Cut wasn't really that. It was just a more detailed version of what we already got. That's why I still was like, so that's what we're getting? Like I found it out, what, 2 or 3 months before Snyder Cut came out. And we talked about it on the film panel, was that we're still getting Steppenwolf, the shitty villain. We're still getting the same hunky-dory story. It's just going to be more detailed. And the suits are going to look better. I mean, yeah, it was better. It was a better version of what we got. But we already knew that was going to be that. We already knew that it was going to be a better version because they already knew what they did wrong. And that's what I said before, is that Zack Snyder had nothing finished. So he had to do all the other shit. So he just added a whole bunch of shit and got people back in their fucking costumes and all this other stuff. Any director. You could pick Joe Blow off the street and he'd make it. If you say this movie was terrible, make it better, he'll make it better. Because especially after they gave you the blueprint of what went wrong. in the 2017 Justice League. So of course it was better. It wasn't that much better, but it was still better. So now we're going to 2016. And now David Ayer wants to come out here and still harp on this whole director's cut bullshit. We know, David. We know, Dave. We've known for 5 years. Now, obviously not me. I've heard about, obviously ever since this whole Snyder Cut bullshit was started, 2 years ago? When people start crying about the give us a Snyder Cut, give us a Snyder Cut, give us a Snyder Cut. That was 2019, right? And then that's when we started hearing about David Ayer. His cut wasn't really the final cut. No director's cut is the final cut. Not on a platform, not as on big a budget like that, or a bigger production studio like that, like WB. Now David goes on to say it has traditional character arcs, amazing performances, a solid third act resolution. A handful of people have seen it. If someone says they have seen it, they haven't. So for the Grace Randolphs of the world, don't be running around saying that you got an exclusive fucking viewing of the David Ayer cut of Suicide Squad. Because, bitch, you didn't. Now, we move on in this article. It says, but will this latest letter inspire DC to #release the Ayer cut? Well, after the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League, many DC Comics fans, I think I meant DC Comic fans, but anyways, and many DC Comic fans have begged Warner Brothers to release the Ayer's full version. Warner Media, oh my gosh, dude, the grammar in this shit is awful, man. All right, Warner Media Studios CEO Ann Sarnoff told Variety in March that the studio will not be developing the Ayer's cut. Now, here's what I'm gonna say before we read more of David Ayer's letter. I'm glad they're not doing Ayer's cut. Because one, we've already got an entirely new Suicide Squad movie with an entirely different director. They're going in a different direction. And a different imagination or imagining of this movie and of these characters. So no. And so far, it seems like James Gunn did a way better job with studio cuts. Because, don't get me wrong, because do not fret, do not worry, I'm pretty sure James Gunn's version was cut as well. Because it was done in a, yep, you guessed it, big budget company. Big budget production studio. As a matter of fact, guess which studio it was, ladies and gentlemen? Yep, you guessed it, Warner Brothers. The same people who cut David Ayer's version. So are we going to be, because this movie was reviewed, this movie has already been reviewed well, and 9 times out of 10, when a movie is reviewed as highly regarded as this score right here, and we're a week out from the opening day, yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be crying about a Gunn version. Give me release the Gunn version of the Suicide Squad. I don't think anybody's going to be crying about that. I don't think anybody's going to be asking for that. But yeah, you guys want to ask about David Ayer version. Yeah. Anyways, Ayer's letter goes on to say, so yeah, should be clear by now that I don't have any quit in me. Never have, and why should I? Every day breathing is a gift. Okay, so he's playing a humble card. This dude's all over the place. He's playing a humble card, then he says, they cut my shit, then he says, I love James Gunn. Anyways, he says, he goes on to say, I thought my story was going to end in a grave or a cell long ago. So these I'm living are bonus rounds. Oh my God, man. The grammar on these fucking people, man. All right. Anyways, I'm so honored and blessed to have the career I do. Quit? After my kids watch me come home every day after the studio took over of the edit with my heart torn out? Who would I be? Who would I be to them if I quit? And then he goes on to say, I've never told my side of the story and I never will. Why? Same reason no one ever will know what happened on my submarine. I keep my covenants. I'm old school like that. So I kept my mouth shut and took the tsunami of sometimes shockingly personal criticism. Why? That's what I've done my whole life. Real talk, I'd rather get shot at. I'm so proud of James and excited for the success that's coming. I support WB and am thrilled the franchise is getting the legs it needs. I'm rooting for everyone, the cast, the crew, everybody. Every movie is a miracle, and James's brilliant work will be the miracles of miracles. I appreciate your patience, and I will no longer speak publicly on this matter. Thank God. Thank God. And I love David Ayer, so I don't want this to be a shot at David Ayer. But we got to stop this. We got to stop this. Release this cut. Release that cut. We're not going to get it. And we don't need it. So, and that's the question. That's the big question. Do we need the Ayer cut? The answer is no. We don't. Yes, a lot of people want it. Not most people. Most people could give a shit about the 2016 Suicide Squad. Not including myself, because I do give a shit about the 2016 Suicide Squad movie. I love that movie. It's definitely, I guess you could, at this point, after seeing these reviews of the Suicide Squad, of James Gunn's version of Suicide Squad, yeah, I think I could go as far as saying that, the 2016 Suicide Squad is probably classified as a guilty pleasure at this point. But at the end of the day, David Ayer will not be speaking on this matter publicly. And guess what? You all know how petty I am as a person. And then I call out bullshit when I see it. So I am holding David Ayer to his word. I do not want to see another word come out of David Ayer's mouth about fucking Suicide Squad. And I'm not saying that to be some kind of fucking, not trying to police the guy or anything like that. I mean, yeah, freedom of speech, blah, blah, whatever. Yes, of course. What I'm really trying to say is, be a man of your word. Be a man of your word. Because if you do speak publicly on this matter again, you're lighting fire. You're just adding more flame to the fire. You're just pouring more gasoline on a fire that was dying out. And you decided to speak on it again. And again, I think this is very poor. It could be worse, obviously. And David Ayer is it seems like this dude's actually pretty humble about it. You could tell that he still has a sour taste in his mouth. But again, if you're put in that position of David Ayer, and then now all of this shit's coming up when the new Suicide, I'm not gonna lie, man, I would be kind of salty too. But again, you're talking about 5 years later. Why not air your grievances out? Why not air out all your grievances in winter of 2016 after the movie already finished its 90-day release? Why not air out your grievances then? Why not spark all this shit then? Why wait until 5 years later when James Gunn and everyone else and half of the cast that was with you is doing their rollout for this movie, trying to get people to go to theaters to go see this movie so that they can get another one? And yet you're speaking on this on fucking Twitter. So you're tweeting about this bullshit and calling it an open letter. That's my only thing. It's yes, the letter itself, I believe he said it almost perfectly. Because it seems like that's literally how he felt. That's really God honest truth how he felt. But again, it's just very, very bad timing. And like I said earlier, it could have been worse timing. This could have happened next week on opening day. And that would have been horrible. But, he could have did this shit 6 months ago. 3 months ago. But he's decided to wait until July, a week before the theatrical release of this movie. Now, to me, I think that's poor taste in David Ayer because people have been speaking on this matter. Release the Ayer cut came out last year. I saw that shit trending last year. He could have definitely come out and said, hey, look, it ain't going to happen. Leave it the fuck alone. I'm not doing anything else. I want nothing to do with Warner Brothers. He said nothing. He just let them ramble on about it. And then we kept getting closer and closer and closer and closer to Suicide Squad. And now he wants to speak on it. Aye. Anyways, look, guys, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for supporting the channel. Continue to support the channel. Hit that like and subscribe. And make sure that you guys tune in next week when I do my reaction straight out of the theater, right out of the theater reaction to Suicide Squad next week, as well as my full-blown review of the Suicide Squad next weekend. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned. We got the film panel is at an all-time high. So we got the film panel. We got another review coming on Tuesday night as well. Look, I got some shit going on here over at Half-Ass Podcast. So it's content central here, man. So make sure you guys hit that like, subscribe, all that other bullshit. I am me. This is Half-Ass Pod, ladies and gentlemen. And I am OU.